Today, I am joined by Rory Peter. He is the Executive Director of the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef. Now, Rory, this is a global roundtable, so your guys' mission is to help aid in sustainability for beef productions all over the world. And you guys have 3 goals to help achieve that. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. So there are 3 goals, each one really with a target date of 2030, and there are some interim dates to measure them by and make sure that we're on track. But the first one is around climate, and it's to reduce the climate impact of beef by 30% by 2030. And the second one is around nature positive production. So trying to make the beef industry a net positive contributor to nature by 2030. And the third one is around animal health and welfare, which is giving animals a good life and ensuring that they are basically having their needs met, and we are adhering to the OIE's standards for animal welfare by 2030 as well.
So for the everyday farmer wanting to, make a difference on their cattle operation, what can they do to help achieve that?
There are lots of things, and it depends, of course, where you're starting from. But for the guy who's got a cow-calf operation, just ensuring that those cows are getting in calf every year, that's a huge factor, because for every cow that doesn't get in calf, you're producing those same methane emissions, but you're not producing any beef. So that's it's all about reproductive management, reproductive health of the herd, making sure they've got the right nutrition, making sure that your grazing management is good. There are a ton of things to do, and they're going to vary from producer to producer, but that's why you've got advisory services around the world who are helping people to do a better job.
Absolutely. And as you said, there's multiple ways to mitigate, the amount of emissions that come from the beef industry. Let's talk, research and technology. What do you think the next big push in regards to emissions and sustainability with the beef industry would be?
Well, you'll probably be aware of the fact that there are a few additives that you can add to feed which will modify the rumen flora. And some of these are already commercially available, and some of them are in development. The ones that are currently available can lead to a reduction in emissions of methane from the rumen, so enteric emissions, but of about 30%, which is already a good step in the right direction. There are some that are being trialed based on a seaweed called Asparagopsis taxiformis, and that seaweed, when harvested at the right stage and when prepared in the right way, can actually lead to even higher reductions in the order of 85%, which would be a huge breakthrough. But clearly there are some other issues there, because we don't have all that seaweed, and we need the logistics to get it to people and so on. But it's really interesting that is possible. And I think that is going to be an area of research that people spend a lot of time on in the coming years and hopefully make progress with.
And sustainability within the beef sector, I know at least within Canada and the United States, there's a lot of focus on what are the alternatives to that. We're going to Beyond Meat or plant-based alternatives when we're talking about sustainability, but there may be a little bit more than meets the eye.
Well, I think one of the things that needs to be recognized widely is the positive contribution of grazing ruminants, and particularly in Canada and the northern Great Plains of the US as well. They need grazing ruminants to sustain those grasslands and the biodiversity of those grasslands, and to keep putting carbon back in the soil where it belongs. So there's definitely a very positive role for grazing cattle to play. And that's something I think people should be talking about and saying, okay, well, there are issues around methane that we're working on, but it's not all a negative story. They're actually really positive stories about benefiting from cattle.
That was all the questions that I had. Are there any other aspects of this that you think are important to touch on?
All of those plant-based products, they still have a lot to demonstrate to the world to really prove that they're any better. I mean, both in terms of sustainability, because when you plow soil, you release a lot of carbon. You will not get that carbon back into the soil until it reverts to grassland. And also in terms of nutrition. a product that's made of 26 different ingredients that we don't normally eat and haven't been used to eating, as compared to a product which is one wholesome ingredient from an animal, I think it's a question, and I'm sure there's been a lot of work done on it, and there will continue to be so. But I wouldn't just take it on the word of the guy who's producing the product. We need to have independent people looking at these things and saying, well, okay, there's a balance here, and it's a food system. There's a role for cattle, there's a role for livestock. If you look globally, half of the fertilizer we use to grow our crops is actually animal manure. So if we stop using animals, where are we going to get that manure to grow our crops from? It's a system, and I think that's what people tend to forget. They look very black and white and say, oh, this is better than that. And I'm saying, actually, those two things work quite nicely together.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
That was my pleasure. Thank you.